You may be seated. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, Minister of Employment and Labor, Mr. Thulas Nxesi, all ministers of the government of the Republic of South Africa were present here with us. The deputy ministers also present here with us. The Premier of Gauteng, Mr. Andrek Panyaza Lusifi, the Deputy Chair of Council of the University of Johannesburg, Dr. Yondela Ndema, and all the council members who are present here this morning, the leadership of the Department of Employment and Labor who are here with us today, Mr. Acting Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg, Dr. Mpoti Ralipata, and the members of the executive leadership of the University of Johannesburg present here this morning. The President of COSATU, Ms. Zingiswa Losi, members of the Diplomatic Corps, most importantly, the Elijah Barayi, senior government officials present, the leadership of the organized labor, in particular those who are organizing here at the University of Johannesburg, present here, the leadership of the Student Representative Council of the University of Johannesburg, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Absheni. According to Nelson Mandela, he said, there comes a time in the life of any nation when there remain only two choices, submit or fight. That time has come to South Africa. We shall not submit, and as we have no choice, but will hit back by all means in our power in defense of our people, our future, and our freedom, close quote. These words by Mandela represented the views of and the feelings and the aspirations of an entire generation. It is this generation that laid a solid foundation for our freedom and democracy. And one of those pioneers was Elijah Barayi, who joined the Youth League of the African National Congress in 1948 before being arrested as part of those who took part in the therefore befitting that we gather here today in this little corner of South Africa to celebrate 30 years of our democracy by celebrating and honoring this stalwart of our democracy and our freedom. But mine is not to be a speaker today, and I'm very happy that I don't have that difficult task, but is to facilitate. My name is Mandla Khatebe. I'm the director for the Center for Data and Digital Communication of Johannesburg, and I will just be the program director for today. Before we start, ladies and gentlemen, just some few housekeeping rules, which you are all familiar with. The first one is to request all of you to just ensure that your phones are on silence, of course, including the Samsungs. The second rule is that there are bathrooms on my left. So should you need one, please do so quietly without disturbing the event. And I'm made to believe that the event is also live streamed, so it may be in your best interest not to fall asleep because you may appear somewhere sleeping. Because we've got a short but impactful program this morning, without any waste of time, let me take this opportunity to welcome on stage our acting Vice Chancellor and Principal to officially open the gathering by virtue of power vested in him, I suppose. Please put your hands together for Dr. Mpoti.
I'm not going to do the by virtue thing today. President of the Republic of South Africa, Your Excellency President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, Minister of Employment and Labor, Minister Thembelani Ngesi, Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Dr. Blayden Nzimande, other ministers who are present here, deputy ministers, our Premier of Gauteng, Mr. I will also call you Hendrik Lesufi, the President of COSATU, Ms. Zungisa Losi, labor leaders who are present here, deeply honored that it will be delivered by none other, our President, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa. Having said that, of course, we meet under the shadow of the tragic events that we have seen unfolding in George, in that tragic construction accident. And our thoughts and prayers are with the families of those people that have been injured and those people that have lost their lives in that tragic accident. Mr. Barayi's role in our country's history is indeed immeasurable. Perhaps one of the greatest tragedies of our time is that he sadly passed away a few months before the first democratic elections in 1994. His absence during the pivotal moment in our nation's history is keenly felt. We are acutely aware of the invaluable role he played in shaping a free and fair South Africa. As we reflect on his legacy, we cannot help but lament the fact that he did not live to witness the fruits of his labor, the birth of a new and inclusive South Africa. His spirit, however, continues to inspire us 30 years on. Barayi's early activism began with the ANC Youth League, as already been said. He participated in anti-apartheid campaigns and was arrested during the Defiance campaign. As he said, he was delighted to go to jail for this cause. He worked briefly for the Department of Native Affairs, but resigned due to its role in the apartheid administration. He later joined the Congress of South African Trade Unions, or COSATU, and he became its first president in 1985. He played a crucial role in organizing mine workers and was involved in strikes and protests against unjust dismissals. He was detained multiple times during states of emergencies, but continued his activism upon his release. At the launch of COSATU in 1985, Barayi called for the abolition of past laws and advocated for disinvestment to pressure the apartheid regime. He leaves behind a formidable legacy of activism. Justice Fiso, the former ambassador to Cuba, once wrote, Elijah Barayi understood well that the struggle of the workers of our country, in particular, and our people in general, required a formidable force of a federation, and from this premise, a call to Botha to resign, reverberated with a call to attain national independence, for the workers could not enjoy democratic rights of representation and trade union rights under a repressive and authoritarian regime. Under the collective leadership of Barayi, the South African working class understood the dialectical relationship between the national and class struggle. They understood well the interconnectedness between a struggle to attain rights, to organize at the workplace, to the rights that can fully be exercised in a democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic society. It is fitting then that we celebrate him with this lecture, as we also celebrate 30 years since the apartheid government and structures were dismantled. President Ramaphosa's history is inextricably linked with that of Barayi. It was in 1982, at the request of the Council of Unions of South Africa that President Ramaphosa, Barayi, and James Mukati founded the National Union of Mineworkers. This is no one better poised to deliver this lecture and provide insight into Barayi and his legacy. Of course, in commemorating Barayi, we recommit ourselves to the principles he stood for: dignity in labor, solidarity,
message of support, Program Director. As organized labor in South Africa, we are honored to be part of this inaugural Elijah Barayi lecture, joined by the family and comrades from across labor movement. This memorial lecture follows the UNISA conferring the honorary doctorate degree to President Elijah Barayi, followed by the declaration of his grave as a site of national symbol by the provincial Gauteng government. The role that Dr. Barayi played in our liberation. This is a moment to reflect on those who sacrificed so much for us to be here today. From President Elijah Barayi to Ray Alexander. It is an occasion for us to celebrate the many gains we have won, and most importantly, to remind ourselves of how much
did that together with the Prime Minister of Sweden. It's really befitting that as we talk about those challenges, he's the right person. And government has deemed this Workers' Month as the time when the Department of Employment and Labour should highlight the labour dispensation that has been legislated since the advent of democracy, including a number of gains which the President of COSATU as a representative of labour has mentioned. The labour and the trade union rights, the robust system of collective bargaining, the set of the minimum conditions in terms of the BCEA, employment equity, the COIDA issues, the social dialogue mechanism at NEDLEC, which is hailed as a major achievement by the ILO. The national minimum wage we're talking about. And I must mention that the minimum wage is one of the first pieces of legislation which has been enacted by this administration under the leadership of President Ramaphosa. Coincidentally, again, when those negotiations were hard at NEDLEC, he was the one who was pulling, as a deputy president, all the different constituencies together. Very difficult negotiations. The president has also exercised leaderships on a number of issues. Cast your eyes or your minds back to the 80s. A young lawyer making career choices, perhaps to join a law firm and to make money, or rather to devote your talents to the uplifting of your people and the exploited mine workers in particular. To move amongst the miners, organizing, mobilizing, taking their demands to the employer, culminating in what is known today as one of the mighty 1987 mine workers' strike, the costliest strike in the history of the country, a strike which announced to the employers and the country and the world that workers would not take their exploitation lying down, that they would organize and take action to gain their rights. And from the struggles and the organizations that emerged came the legacy of the progressive labor legislation, which the president of COSATU has talked about. This is a precious legacy. It must be guarded at all costs. As you know, Elijah Barayi was elected as the first president of COSATU, and its founding conference launched in Durban. He was also one of the founding leaders of the National Union of Mineworkers in 1982. And Comrade Barayi is a fitting representative of the generation of leaders which emerged in the workplaces, in the communities, from faith-based organizations and from the schools and universities to lead the struggles against apartheid for human rights and freedom. From the unions, this combined with the commitment to the labor rights and improved socio-economic conditions. It's therefore fitting that this inaugural lecture of Elijah Barayi should be delivered by the President of South Africa, not only because it lends prestige and gravitas to this occasion, but also because President Ramaphosa, also Comrade Ramaphosa at that time, was an integral part of these struggles, a founding member and the first General Secretary of the NUM, and a founding leader of COSATU. He is uniquely placed to comment on the life and times of Elijah Barayi. It therefore gives me pleasure to invite the President of South Africa, Mr. Madamela Cyril Ramaphosa, to deliver the inaugural Elijah Barayi lecture. Can we all give him a big hand and all stand, President.
Thank you. Let's be seated, please. Program Director, the Barayi family, who are represented here by his children, his grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren, by his cousins, and a number of other family members who I had the joy just before we started. And one of them reminded me when I used to visit Barayi's home at mine in Blijvoer Uitzicht in Carltonville. She was just a little girl, and today she's a grown-up young woman. Minister of Employment, Minister Thulas Nxesi, ministers and deputy ministers who are present here, the Premier of Gauteng, Mr. Andre Panyaza Lusufi. He always squirms when the name Andre is mentioned, and he prefers the Panya name. The President of COSATU, Singi Swalosi, the General Secretary of SAFTU, Vavi, Zelinzima Vavi, the leadership of this university, both in its council and the academic staff, and leadership of business present here, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great honor for me to have been invited to deliver this inaugural lecture about my comrade, my fellow traveler in the struggle of workers, and a good friend, Comrade Elijah Barayi. Not Barayi, but Barayi. It is significant that this inaugural lecture is being held during the 30th year of our freedom. The achievement of democracy was a cause to which Elijah Barayi dedicated his life. It is a tragedy that he never got to see the dawn of freedom break over the South African horizon. We lost him 30 years ago, just 3 months before South Africa's first non-racial election. Yet, what a great legacy he left behind, and what a powerful voice continues to live on. Elijah Barayi's life was a testament of bravery and to standing firm on principle, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable costs. It takes a great hero to go against the norm and to stand for what is right, even when those around them remain silent or look away. Elijah Barayi was a hero of the anti-apartheid struggle. He joined the African National Congress Youth League, as we heard, in 1948 as a teenager, and was active in the Defiance campaign in the early 50s. Speaking later about his arrest for leading a march against the past laws in Craddock, he said, "I was very delighted to go to jail." Now, you will never find many people who will tell you that they were delighted to go to jail. I remember my own youngest daughter. When she was very young and at school, they were going through the history of South Africa, which we never really got an opportunity to go through because we were taught the history of the Voortrekkers, and we were taught the history of Otto van Bismarck. But later, the history lessons changed, and she was being taught the history, they were being taught the history of South Africa, and somewhere they spoke about her father. She was still very young, who had been arrested. And she went home and told her mother, she asked her mother, "Did you know that your husband was arrested and he's a jailbird?" She found that very, very difficult to understand. But Mbaki, as we called him, was one of those who said he was delighted to have been arrested. Delighted because he knew he was being arrested for a just cause. There would for him be many more jail sentences, many years spent in jail, including under the state of emergency. After he was released, he was continuously harassed by the police, forcing him to leave his hometown Craddock and, as it were, to go underground. And he sought refuge on the mines, first at the state mines in Brakpan, then in Carltonville at Blyvoor Uitzicht. Now, the mining industry, as we later found out, had become a place for a number of people who were running away from arrest. It was either you went into exile, or you went underground, or you went to the mines where you literally went underground, day by day. That's where he sought refuge in. He recruited himself into the National Union of Mineworkers that we formed in 1982 and rose from being a shaft steward to being elected vice president at the inaugural conference, or Congress as we called it, that we held in Klerksdorp. Now, he was elected in the deep early hours of the morning because we did not have the facilities as mine workers and other unions have today of accommodating people overnight in a hotel. So the mine workers would knock off from work on a Saturday afternoon and travel to Klerksdorp from all parts of the country, and the Congress would start at about 6 o'clock in the evening and go on until 6 o'clock in the morning. And he was elected around about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning as the first vice president of the National Union of Mineworkers. So today, on this day, a memorable day it is, we honor Barayi and his family who are present here, and we say to his family, "Siyabulela, nina baka Barayi, for the sacrifices that you made as a family. You enabled him to spend time in building a gigantic union like the National Union of Mineworkers." Elijah Barayi, the son of a municipal worker and a domestic worker, was indeed a hero of South Africa's working class. We went throughout the country, crisscrossing the length and the breadth of our country with James Motlatsi, who unfortunately cannot be here today as he's just about to enter Lesotho to see family. The three of us used to go throughout the length and the breadth of the country, and in many ways, Elijah Barayi was an organizer of the National Union of Mineworkers. And we would spend many hours traveling throughout the country. I remember one time when we were driving, and as we drove to Kimberley, we were 4 in the car. Marcel Golding, myself, and Barayi. So on the way to Kimberley, as we used to travel at night, in the afternoon, because we were going for a very quick visit and would be returning later in the evening, on the way to Kimberley, he saw a number of sheep in the various farms. And coming from the Eastern Cape, as they do, they love eating their meat. And he said, "Yo, nalikusha." What? And then he said, GS, meaning, why don't we allow Marcel Golding to drive now? And when we come back, he'll be tired. You will take over driving. And we allowed Marcel Golding to drive. And on our way back, he said, it's possible when you are driving, we will see one of these sheep along the way. You will stop the car and we will pick up one of these sheep, put it in the boot. And then he went on to say, and if we are stopped on the way, because Marcel Golding was light complexioned and he had long hair in a ponytail, he said, and he was like, what the full sort of drama that would unfold would be. And he said, once we are arrested, there used to be many roadblocks. He says, when we get arrested and stopped, the sheep in the boot, you, myself, and James Motlatsi will get out, and Marcel will now be driving. It was the other way around. Marcel will be driving. And we will say, buy a donkey bus, and just walk away. He was creative. At the launch of the Congress of Trade Unions in December of 1985, he was elected as the Federation's first president. Those of us who were privileged to being made will remember it well. We remember the rally at Curry's Fountain in Durban, where more than 10,000 people sang in unison, Ukosatu Sonyukanai Enkululekwe. We remember the electrifying speech that I delivered at the launch of COSATU. And he had been given a speech by the then incoming leadership of COSATU, the various heads of the other unions. They had written out a speech for him. And the speech was like, dull and fairly straightforward. On getting on the stage, I would have seen in the Comrade Elijah Barayi put that speech aside and started speaking from the heart. And he said, P.W. Botha, you better get out of your position so that Nelson Mandela can come and be the state president of this country. And he then went on to say he's giving P.W. Botha 6 months to abolish the past laws. And he gave it as a clear warning. Soon thereafter, books appeared, and the Green Pass books was a direct result of what Elijah Barayi had yielded. And now that was a more universal identity book for all, not just for black South Africans. That is what Elijah Barayi had yielded. But he went on to say that Mandela should be released, and that the Bantustans be abolished, and that the state of emergency be lifted, and for the army to be withdrawn from the townships. Now, so you know, that was not in his original written speech. It was the typical Elijah Barayi speaking as a struggle hero, speaking from his heart, a person who was really shaped and made by the principles of the African National Congress. It was, as one prominent international publication called it, a declaration of defiance. It was this defiance that was to become a defining feature of COSATU in the years that followed. Elijah Barayi's impact extended far beyond our borders. He forged alliances with labor movements and other like-minded people around the world, garnering support for the anti-apartheid struggle and bringing global attention to the injustices being perpetrated in South Africa. He was the one who encouraged the leadership of the National Union of Mineworkers to be in constant contact with SACTU, constant contact with the leadership of the ANC in exile. Whenever we traveled overseas, whenever we a great achievement. Whenever we traveled overseas, he would be the one who made us be in contact with SACTU and the leadership of the African National Congress. And he is the one who influenced the National Union of Mineworkers to, in 1986, elect Nelson Mandela as the life honorary president of the National Union of Mineworkers. In that way, the NUM had defined its clear position. At the time, there were workerist type of unions and charterist unions, as they were called then. And as we left CUSA and forged the NUM to be clearly on the side of the struggle of the masses of our people, and elected Nelson Mandela as the life honorary president of the NUM, and thereafter in 1987, being the first union that adopted the Freedom Charter, it was clear that indeed the positioning of the NUM was in line with the Congress movement, and it had defined itself, and all this had happened because Elijah Barayi had brought to bear his ideological orientation onto the NUM in more ways than one. His union activism could not be separated from the struggle for national liberation. I've told the story many times of how he would ask all candidates that were being interviewed for positions, for jobs in the NUM, if they knew the Freedom Charter. If they didn't, they were not hired. And if there ever was cadre deployment, this was cadre deployment in full flight, because you had to be aligned to the ideology and the principles of the Congress movement. As we look back on 30 years of democracy, we can see very clearly how the relationship between worker struggles and the fight for broader political and social change have shaped our country. We can see how workers have contributed to defining our constitutional order. The Constitution, with its Bill of Rights, is today the bedrock of the democratic society we have been striving to build since 1994. It is centered around the right of every South African to have their human dignity respected and protected. When the first COSATU Congress demanded the right to strike, when it demanded benefits for workers to be guaranteed, benefits to the unemployed and those threatened by retrenchment, when it demanded better occupational health and safety, and that the rights of female workers to be given particular protection, it was heralded as revolutionary. 30 years into democracy, we have several progressive labor and social protection laws, including the right to strike. And it was the labor movement as led by Barayi which insisted that the most fundamental rights that workers should have should be collective bargaining, the right to strike, and the right to have a safe working place. And these were irrevocable, and these were rights that were at the top of the list of what Elijah Barayi insisted should be respected. So for them to have been enshrined in our Constitution is something that we need to pay tribute to Elijah Barayi and the leadership of COSATU and various other worker organizations at the time. And it is in honor of Elijah Barayi that today we have these rights enshrined in our Constitution. So today we dip our flags and our heads in honor of Barayi and say thank you for the leadership that you showed. This commitment played a crucial role in improving worker rights and secured fair compensation, reasonable working hours, and safer working environments. And this inspired him to forge ahead, ensuring that the rights and the freedoms enshrined in the Freedom Charter are indeed secured. We have the Labor Laws Act today and the basic conditions of employment that are aimed at protecting, advancing workers' rights. We have laws to safeguard the health and the safety of workers and a compensation fund to support workers who are injured at work. The first COSATU Congress, at which he was elected president, resolved to lead a campaign for a legally enforced national minimum wage for all workers. Just over 5 years ago, after extensive engagements among social partners, we introduced the national minimum wage, improving immediately the lives of some 6 million workers. This development was heavily opposed by those who thought that there would be a bloodbath of job losses. And as it turned out, there was no bloodbath of job losses. What has happened instead, the wages of workers who are poorly paid have been rising on a continuous basis. Not yet at the living wage level, but advancing towards a living wage. And we have to thank leaders like Elijah Barayi, who were very clear that the aspiration that was contained in the Freedom Charter, that there should be a living wage for working people, has been attained. And we say once again, thank you, Comrade Elijah Barayi, for that leadership. Tied to the national minimum wage, the Congress called for the abolition of a general sales tax on essential items. As government, we continue to implement value-added tax zero rating as a pro-poor policy. In 2001, we established an unemployment insurance fund, which has been a lifeline to vulnerable South Africans who are out of work. The fund proved itself to be agile and adaptable during COVID-19 pandemic, when it administered a relief scheme to support both workers and employers affected by economic disruption caused by the pandemic. The first COSATU Congress called for a national program of public works to provide jobs for the unemployed. Since 1994, we've built a number of mass public employment programs to provide income support, skills and training for South Africans who are out of work. These include the expanded Public Works Program, the Community Works Program, and most recently the Presidential Employment Stimulus. We've also just recently launched a new phase of the Labour Activation Program, which is focused on creating decent and sustainable work opportunities in many sectors across the economy. The Minister of Labour and Employment has been piloting this. Over the past 30 years, we have used the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Preferential Procurement, the Black Industrialist Program, and the Worker Share Ownership Schemes to transform patterns of ownership and control in our economy. I recently participated in a conference on the state of worker share ownership. In South Africa today, more than 500,000 workers are part owners of the companies that they work for, with more companies having indicated that they are going to be participating. Mine workers, farm workers, workers in manufacturing, and other sectors today share in the fruits of their labor through worker ownership schemes. As a country, we have come indeed a long way in giving effect to the rights of women workers. We passed the Employment Equity Act to address racial and gender discrimination in the workplace and continue to progressively implement affirmative action policies that favor women. We have laws protecting women against sexual harassment in the workplace. By law, no employer can discriminate against a woman on account of pregnancy. Women are entitled to a minimum of 4 months of maternity leave and can apply to the UIF for paid benefits. The principle of equal pay for work for equal value is enshrined in law. And this is going to make sure that there is equal pay between men and women who do exactly the same work. We are saying that discrimination must come to an end, and we want to ensure that companies do not discriminate against the women workers in our country in favor of men only. And we will ensure that that is carried out. These achievements form part of the legacy of Elijah Barayi. They need to be protected and they need to be advanced. This is particularly important at a time when collective industrial relations are in decline in many parts of the world. Trade union membership has been going down over time, including in our own country. According to statistics from the Department of Employment and Labor, union membership fell by approximately 11% last year. This is taking place at a time of greater automation, increasing casualization of labor, and more workers moving to the informal sector. Internal divisions, governance issues, and the ability of unions to service and organize workers have also contributed to this decline. This is something that must be addressed with urgency. And we therefore need to remember the dedication of people like Elijah Barayi in organizing unions. He was a true organizer, and he wished and wanted to see unions growing on a continuous basis rather than declining what we are seeing today. How we wish that Elijah Barayi could be present today to help our unions to increase their membership and grow into strong industrial unions and be the unions of the days when Elijah Barayi was one of the key leaders of our trade union movement. Strong trade union membership is vital to consolidate the gains and social protection, to have good and effective industrial relations, to have good occupational health and safety regulations, and to also secure workers' rights. There are some in our country who are calling for the hard-won rights that workers have won, like collective bargaining, to be curtailed and for the minimum wage to be scrapped. And they argue that if they ever were to come into power, they would make sure that the minimum wage is scrapped. So trade unions need to be stronger to make sure that that never happens in South Africa, because it will be a total reversal of what workers have achieved and what Elijah Barayi struggled for. We have a collective responsibility to build on the achievements of democracy and to work with greater vigor to overcome poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Now, despite the progress that we have made over the last 30 years, the legacy of apartheid and the shadow that apartheid has cast over our present and the future of our country continues to define so much of our society. Inequality is exacerbated by high unemployment, poor economic growth, poor service delivery, corruption, crime, and violence. While we have seen great advances in access to education and healthcare, the poor and the working class remain at a great disadvantage. Resolving these challenges requires concerted action from all of society. Building a future that promotes decent work and social justice necessitates that we deepen our collaboration as government, business, labor, and civil society. In this effort, trade unions must remain at the forefront. Labor is key to the success of our industrial policy, which aims to revitalize key industries, to create and keep more jobs locally, and to promote beneficiation of our vast mineral resources. The support of labor is important for our continued investment in economic and social infrastructure. Strong organized labor is the most effective counter to the so-called construction mafias that are wreaking havoc and deterring investors. Labor must be the driving force behind a progressive and just transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient economy and society. When it comes to issues such as these construction mafias, labor must realize that it is the participation of labor of these construction mafia militates against the interests of workers. We therefore need strong trade unions on construction sites that are going to be the bulwark against construction mafia, working together with our police, working together with our communities. It is labor that must also lead the charge to make sure that the construction mafia never get a foothold on construction sites. Because our construction sites create employment, our construction sites increase investment in infrastructure, and it is this that is being targeted by these construction gangs, and labor must be activized to ensure that we act collectively against those who want to deny working people their opportunities for employment. We must continue our collaboration as we strive to ensure that this transition to a renewable energy is indeed just, and that it takes the rights and livelihoods of all affected workers and communities into account. Labor movement must become active participants, not only around the negotiating table for this just transition, but also amongst our communities and also in workplaces. Later today, we will be signing the National Health Insurance Bill into law. Now, the NHI will fundamentally transform the lives of millions of South Africans. It introduces the principle of equity, solidarity, and social justice into a healthcare system that has been for years characterized by high levels of inequality. We want labor to be at the forefront of popularizing the NHI, of engaging with communities and employers alike. Employers who are terrified about the introduction of the NHI. The labor must be the ones who tell employers that the NHI is good for all South Africans, for both employers and workers, that there's nothing that they need to fear. This Labour must do like what Labour did when it came to extending the right to vote to all South Africans. Employers were terrified that their workers who they had exploited over many years, who had been oppressed by the apartheid system, they were terrified when they got to hear that the right to vote would also be extended to them, a right that many employers had enjoyed exclusively for themselves. And it was Labour that calmed down their fears. And they said, fear not. When we vote together, we will be voting for the advancement of South Africa. Similarly, when the right to strike was also on the horizon, it was employers who were also terrified. And Labour had to calm down their fears and say, fear not, the right to strike is a good thing for South African workers. Similarly, you must do so with the national health insurance and tell them that it's going to be healthy for them as well to have the NHI. Now, the level of organization that was detailed in the resolutions of the first COSATU Congress must be brought to bear as we work together to improve the delivery of services in our communities, especially in rural areas. As government, we remain committed to reducing the outsourcing of many municipal services, and we once again call on Labour to work with us to develop internal capacity to deliver quality services to our people. While we work to overcome the injustices of the past, we are looking to the future. As technological advances and globalization reshape the landscape of work, we need to be able to foster innovation and entrepreneurship while safeguarding workers' rights and promoting social dialogue. We need to invest in technology and infrastructure and education to enable sustainable and inclusive economic growth and job creation. At the same time, we must strive to democratize the governance of work. In South Africa, this means strengthening and adapting labor laws, institutions, and regulatory frameworks to protect workers' rights, to promote fair competition, and to ensure social justice. We need to build a more inclusive and resilient labor market that will support a just transition, greater digitization, and other drivers of change. The children born at the dawn of our democracy are today 30 years old. The democratic changes we won in 1994 and the progressive policies that we have implemented since have lifted millions out of poverty and despair and improved their material condition. Yet we know that life is hard for many South Africans. Many of our people are still poor. Many young people are without jobs. Many families in our country struggle to survive. As long as the divisions in our society persist, and as long as some people lead lives of quality and dignity, whilst others suffer on the margins of the economy, our mission remains unfulfilled. Elijah Barayi's mission remains unfulfilled. We owe it to the memory of Elijah Barayi, to the South African people, and to the generations to follow, that we continue to work to overcome this inequality. We have achieved much, We have come far as a nation. Now is the time to set our sights on even further and greater horizons. Now is the time to intensify the struggle for economic equality and shared prosperity for all. It is fitting, as we do so, that we recall the life and contribution of Elijah Barayi. It is fitting that we recall his courage and his dedication, his defiance and his selflessness. As we confront challenges that may at times seem insurmountable, seem impossible to achieve, we are encouraged by Elijah Barayi's resolve. Let us honor the memory of giants like Elijah Barayi by renewing our commitment to building a better, stronger South Africa. As we draw inspiration from the life and times of the men we honor here today, let us deepen our resolve to advance freedom and social justice everywhere, leaving no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you. Asibambeni comrades. Bopha comrades. Siyabonga. Thank you very much. Bathini, President, bathi uyabuya noma angibezwa kahle. Ladies and gentlemen, I think let's give another round of applause for the UJ choir. And another round of applause for the President for that lecture. Now, in the interest of time and without any waste of time, I'm going to call to the podium the person who made this lecture possible. If it wasn't for her, Professor Fiona Chagena, who is the SACHI Chair for Industrial Development here at UJ, this would not have been possible. So she'll be doing the last item on the agenda. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Program Director, even though you exaggerated a bit there. Mr. President, in celebrating these 30 years of democracy, it's fitting that today we've been celebrating the role and legacy of Elijah Barayi, also 30 years since his passing, and of worker and broader working class struggles in contributing to and in shaping this precious democracy of ours. And part of this, as the President discussed, is the labor rights that are easy to take for granted unless and until they're not there. The right not to be fired without due cause and due process, the right to maternity leave, the right to join a trade union, and so on. And beyond these labor rights, we're also today celebrating the contribution of the labor movement to the broader developmental progress as outlined by the President, and looking forwards towards the further challenges to be addressed. And of course, there's no better person to deliver this inaugural lecture than President Ramaphosa, not only as President of the Republic, but also as the first General Secretary of the National Union of Mineworkers and a colleague and comrade of Elijah Barayi. I also see other former NUM leaders here. Franz Baleni was introduced as the longest serving council member, but of course also a former General Secretary of NUM. I also see Comrades Godfrey Oliphant, Zulinzima Vavi, as well as beyond NUM, other former and current labor leaders here today. To the family, thank you for gracing us with your presence at today's lecture. It has been an honor to share the event with you. Minister, to you and your department for partnering with UJ in this wonderful event today. You might have noticed that today's lecture was billed as the inaugural Elijah Barayi Memorial Lecture. And this is because today's event is intended as the first of hopefully many annual memorial lectures in honor of Elijah Barayi. The intention is to hold these every year. This month, May, as Workers' Month. So, Minister, we look forward to working with you in future years, and we look forward to welcoming the family, dignitaries, and hopefully all of you here next year and going forward. Last but certainly not least, let us thank the workers who made this event possible today, including the sign language interpreters, the catering workers, public servants, and all of the other workers and stakeholders who made this event a success. Thank you. And back to you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for those closing remarks. I think you omitted to thank our students, especially those who come from Soweto campus. I think let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. I know that I'm being biased because this used to be our stomping ground when we were students, when it was still called Vista Soweto. We used to call it the Burundi campus. You have not disappointed. That tradition continues. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the program for today's program. May I ask you to remain seated as the President and the entourage leaves the hall, and I'm told that immediately thereafter there will be refreshments that will be served outside. But I think we must also clap for the program director. Don't you think so?
real to